The National Electrical Code, or NEC, doesn't explicitly forbid using a flexible cord and plug to power a permanently wall-mounted process control panel. However, it's vital to carefully consider specific NEC sections. NEC Section 400.83 states that flexible cords and cables should only be used for pendants, wiring of fixtures, appliances, and portable lamps, and they should not be run through holes in walls, ceilings, or floors. NEC Section 400.12 requires that fixed equipment be permanently connected to a branch circuit. Based on these sections, it could be interpreted that using a flexible cord and plug to energize a permanently wall-mounted process control panel wouldn't meet NEC requirements, primarily because the panel is considered fixed equipment and should be permanently connected. Also, running the cord through a hole in the wall could violate NEC Section 400.83. There are exceptions to these requirements that could potentially allow the use of a flexible cord and plug in this situation. NEC Section 400.7. 8 permits the use of flexible cord for connection of electrical equipment where flexibility is necessary to prevent the transmission of noise or vibration, or if used in listed medical equipment. NEC Section 400.12. 3 allows using a flexible cord to connect equipment to a branch circuit where the installation is located in an industrial establishment where flexibility is necessary. NEC Section 400.83 Exception number 3 allows using a flexible cord to connect equipment that is not permanently installed and isn't subject to physical damage. The NEC doesn't explicitly address using a flexible cord and plug to energize a permanently wall-mounted process control panel. The general requirements and exceptions suggest that it might not be a code-compliant installation. However, an inspector might allow it if it meets specific criteria, such as being located in an industrial establishment where flexibility is required and not subject to physical damage. It's always best to consult with a qualified electrician or the authority having jurisdiction, or OJ, to determine the specific requirements for the installation. It is essential to understand the potential implications of using flexible cords in permanent installations. The primary concern revolves around the NEC emphasis on permanent wiring methods for fixed equipment. Flexible cords are generally intended for temporary connections or to provide flexibility for portable devices. When considering the use of a flexible cord for a wall-mounted control panel, evaluate the environment in which the panel is installed. If the location is an industrial establishment where frequent changes or adjustments to the panel's position are necessary, then NEC Section 400.12. 3 might provide an exception. However, ensure that the flexible cord is of appropriate type and gauge for the intended load, and that it is protected from physical damage. The cord should be securely supported and should not be subject to excessive strain. The use of strain relief connectors at both the panel and the receptacle is essential to prevent damage to the cord and its terminations. Another critical consideration is the proper grounding of the control panel. The grounding conductor within the flexible cord must be reliably connected to both the panel's grounding terminal and the grounding pin of the plug. This ensures that any fault current will safely return to the source, minimizing the risk of electrical shock. Additionally, be mindful of the cord's ampacity. The flexible cord must be rated to carry the full load of the control panel without overheating. Consult NEC Table 400.5 for the allowable ampacities of flexible cords and cables. If the control panel draws 20 amps, ensure that the flexible cord is rated for at least 20 amps and that the overcurrent protection device, such as a circuit breaker, is properly sized to protect the cord. When running the flexible cord, avoid creating tripping hazards or exposing the cord to sharp edges or abrasive surfaces. If the cord must pass through a wall, use a listed fitting or bushing to protect the cord from damage. Do not run the cord through holes in walls without proper protection, as this violates NEC Section 400.83. Consider using a surface-mounted raceway or conduit to protect the cord and provide a neat and professional appearance. If the control panel is located in a damp or wet location, use a flexible cord that is listed for wet locations. Ensure that all connections are properly sealed to prevent moisture from entering the panel or the cord. The use of watertight connectors and enclosures is essential in these environments. Furthermore, consider the potential for physical damage to the flexible cord. If the cord is exposed to heavy traffic or is likely to be run over by equipment, provide additional protection such as a cord cover or guard. The cord should be regularly inspected for signs of wear or damage, and it should be replaced immediately if any defects are found. When selecting a flexible cord, choose one that is listed by a recognized testing laboratory such as Underwriters Laboratories or all. This ensures that the cord meets the applicable safety standards and is suitable for the intended application. The cord should also be marked with its voltage and ampacity ratings, as well as the manufacturer's name or trademark. In addition to the NEC requirements, be aware of any local codes or regulations that may apply to the installation. Some jurisdictions may have stricter requirements for the use of flexible cords, or they may require a permit for electrical work. Always check with the local building department or electrical inspector to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and regulations. To summarize, while the NEC doesn't explicitly prohibit using a flexible cord and plug to power a permanently wall-mounted process control panel, it is important to carefully consider the NEC requirements and exceptions. Evaluate the environment in which the panel is installed. Ensure that the flexible cord is of appropriate type and gauge for the intended load, and that it is protected from physical damage. Properly ground the control panel, and be mindful of the cord's ampacity. Avoid creating tripping hazards or exposing the cord to sharp edges or abrasive surfaces. Use a listed fitting or bushing to protect the cord from damage if it must pass through a wall. Consider using a surface-mounted raceway or conduit to protect the cord and provide a neat and professional appearance. If the control panel is located in a damp or wet location, use a flexible cord that is listed for wet locations. Provide additional protection to the flexible cord if it is exposed to heavy traffic or is likely to be run over by equipment. Choose a flexible cord that is listed by a recognized testing laboratory, and be aware of any local codes or regulations that may apply to the installation. In any case, it is advisable to consult with a qualified electrician or the AHJ to determine the specific requirements for the installation and to ensure that it is code compliant. Considering the specifics of a 120/208 volt 20 amp process control panel, several critical factors must be addressed to ensure a safe and code-compliant installation. Firstly, the selection of the flexible cord must be appropriate for the voltage and amperage requirements. For a 20 amp load at 120/208 volts, a cord rated for at least 20 amps and 300 volts should be selected. Common types of flexible cords suitable for this application include SU, SU, and STO cords. These cords are designed for heavy-duty use and are resistant to oil, water, and abrasion. The gauge of the conductors within a flexible cord must also be sufficient to carry the 20 amp load without excessive voltage drop or overheating. According to NEC Table 310.15, V16 for a 20 amp load, a minimum of 12 American wire gauge or AUG copper conductors should be used. However, it is always advisable to consult the manufacturer's specifications for the flexible cord to ensure that it is suitable for the intended application. Secondly, the overcurrent protection device, such as a circuit breaker, must be properly sized to protect the flexible cord and the control panel. The circuit breaker should be rated for no more than the ampacity of the flexible cord, as specified in NEC section 240.4. For a 20 amp load, a 20 amp circuit breaker should be used. The circuit breaker should also have an interrupting rating sufficient to handle the available fault current at the installation location. Thirdly, the grounding of the control panel is critical to ensure electrical safety. The grounding conductor within the flexible cord must be reliably connected to the panel's grounding terminal and the grounding pin of the plug. This ensures that any fault current will safely return to the source, minimizing the risk of electrical shock. The grounding conductor should be sized according to NEC Table 250.122, which specifies a minimum of 12 AWG copper for a 20 amp circuit. Fourthly, the plug and receptacle used to connect the flexible cord to the branch circuit must be of the appropriate type and rating for the voltage and amperage requirements. For a 120/208 volt 20 amp circuit, an ML40-20 plug and receptacle should be used. This locking type plug and receptacle ensures a secure connection and prevents accidental disconnection. The plug and receptacle should also be listed by a recognized testing laboratory such as UL and should be installed according to the manufacturer's instructions. Fifthly, the installation of the flexible cord must comply with all applicable NEC requirements, including those related to strain relief, support, and protection from physical damage. Strain relief connectors should be used at both the panel and the receptacle to prevent damage to the cord and its terminations. The flexible cord should be supported at intervals not exceeding 4.5 feet, as specified in NEC section 400.14. The cord should be protected from physical damage by routing it away from heavy traffic areas and sharp edges. If the cord must pass through a wall, a listed fitting or bushing should be used to protect it from damage. Sixthly, the control panel itself must be properly listed and labeled for its intended use. The panel should be marked with its voltage, amperage, and horsepower ratings, as well as the manufacturer's name or trademark. The panel should also comply with all applicable UL standards, such as UL 500A for industrial control panels. Seventhly, the installation should be inspected by a qualified electrician or the AHA to ensure that it complies with all applicable codes and regulations. The inspector will verify that the flexible cord is of the appropriate type and gauge for the intended load, that the overcurrent protection device is properly sized, that the grounding is properly installed, that the plug and receptacle are of the appropriate type and rating, and that the installation complies with all other applicable NEC requirements. In conclusion, while using a flexible cord and plug to power a 120/208 volt 20 amp process control panel is not explicitly prohibited by the NEC, it is important to carefully consider the NEC requirements and exceptions, and to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and regulations. The selection of the flexible cord, the overcurrent protection device, the grounding, the plug and receptacle, and the installation methods must all be carefully considered to ensure a safe and code-compliant installation. It is always advisable to consult with a qualified electrician or the AHA to determine the specific requirements for the installation and to ensure that it is code-compliant.